What's up, lore masters? This video is a part of the Battletech series, Rise and Fall of the Star League. It would behoove you to watch this series from the very beginning for any of this to make sense, so click in the top right hand corner right about now. With that out of the way, let's just get into it. Last we talked, the creation of the Castle Bryans, which were huge military complexes named after Brian Cameron, had been constructed. Which, if we knew anything about Battletech, the Camerons really have a frackin' ego problem. It would make Thanos caution them on being too ambitious. After the construction of these complexes, Brian Cameron would be ultimately killed in a freak accident with a bull because why the hell wouldn't he be? The next in line, wait for it, Cameron, Judith Cameron to be exact, would continue her brother's politics and reinforce planets with Castle Bryans on them. It would be at this time the Age of War began to impact the Hegemony heavily, leading to increased battles with the Capellan Confederation and Draconis combined. The majority of these confrontations occurred between 2407 and 2409. In 2419, Judith retired and the son of Brian Cameron and Catherine McQuiston, Richard Cameron, became Director General. He would be notable for taking Cantaris from the Federated Sons in 2431 and further solidifying that only a Cameron would ever be able to become a Director General. I know, shocking a Cameron would consolidate power, but here we are. Richard's son, Jacob, would be extremely unpopular. Though, unpopular as he would be more than capable as a warrior and would engage in conflicts against the Capellan Confederation and Federated Sons, continuing what had happened before. He would be best known for advancements in battle mechs, however. These advancements would ultimately come at a cost of other military units who would ultimately break off from the Terran Hegemony to go to parts unknown. However, as we noted, even with his military prowess, Jacob was very unpopular politically. He was nearly killed in 2448, which is a shame that he wasn't because it would have been a welcome change from the mundane deaths of all the other Camerons. But die mundanely he would, and Theodore and Elizabeth Cameron would follow him as leaders, Theodore being Jacob's son and Elizabeth Jacob's granddaughter. And ultimately these two would do nothing. They'd become lushes and only degrade the Terran Hegemony both politically and militarily. Interestingly, at least in my opinion, the Hegemony would enter into a golden age of sorts with Deborah Cameron assuming the Director Generalship. And let me take a moment to say this piece of lore, kind of like I mentioned, I found fascinating. Because it stopped the monotony. Over and over, it was all about war, Cameron, lust, and decay, but now you have a Cameron who knows what she is doing. Under her rule, the Terran Hegemony became a leader in diplomacy and trade for all intents and purposes. When she first took over, anti-Cameron and indeed anti-government sentiment was at an all-time high. Curiously enough, she allowed the populace to air their grievances and even made internal changes to help soothe activists who wished to dissolve the government. During the reign of Theodore and Elizabeth, political parties had risen up again to advocate for the dissolving of all of the directorship, but now? Deborah had stopped that, and she did it without force, but with charisma. With the internal turmoil of the Hegemony stabilized, she would go on to facilitate the Ares Convention, something we'll get into more later, but effectively was the setting of rules during the Age of War which protected citizens. She also expanded the services of the Hegemony to assist in bartering and negotiations between the great houses. This not only calmed the fighting, but made the Terran Hegemony very wealthy. The Hegemony would also use superior technology to terraform planets with other great houses and jointly run those planets. This created peace and lasting bonds between the Terrans and the other houses. Known as a policy of aggressive peacemaking, because why wouldn't it have aggressive in the name, you would see an expansion of the Hegemony Central Intelligence Agency and the Department of Foreign Relations. Like before, though, this came at the expense of the Hegemony military elements. This fostered a slow resentment within the military ranks, and it would slowly begin to fester more and more. Even though the aggressive peacemaking policy was the right choice, especially when you consider the Commonwealth combined ceasefire, the fact peace, and other confrontations resolved peaceably. But the military elements of the Hegemony were not pleased, and this would be something in the background that would stay with the military for a long time. Deborah retired in 2542 and her son Joseph took over. He continued the focus on diplomacy and was assassinated for his troubles, which again, is cool that he didn't die of mundane means, but it sucks that they walked out of the Golden Age. A civil war broke out between some disloyal military elements, including Captain Henry Green and the 51st Dragoon Regiment, and loyal elements of the Hegemony with Ian Cameron as Director General. The mutineers successfully gained control of the capital, Geneva, only to lose it after 10 days of fighting with no electricity or water. Ian resumed control, and the Central Intelligence Agency purged all disloyal units within the military. However, even with the purge, there was a revamping of the military and increased funding to it. Ian still pushed for diplomacy though, and realizing that the Hegemony would soon be in a very weakened position as the resources of the Empire were running dangerously low, pushed for peace within the Inner Sphere and the rise of the Star League. The Star League would be Ian's crowning masterpiece and complete his dream of restoring Terra as the core of the human empire. The Star League is basically the entire reason I'm doing this whole series, so we'll be discussing it in a lot of detail at a later point. The main takeaway to understand here is that the Terran Hegemony was a central figure in the Star League, and the League's entire genesis was due to the Terran Hegemony itself. The Star League would allow the Terrans to trade technology for much-needed resources. This second golden age for the Terran Hegemony, the golden years of the Star League, would last just shy of 200 years. The beginning of the end would happen when Richard Cameron, another Richard I guess, would take over after his father in 2750. Richard would begin to trust completely in Stefan Amaris, which turned out to be just a great idea, let me tell you, and I'm sure I got the name Amaris right, so you guys can go ahead and let me know that was wrong. In December of 2766, Richard was killed by Amaris. By this time, Amaris had tricked the Star League's military, known as the Star League Military Defense Force, out of position, allowing his forces to easily take control of most of the Star League's inner core, the Terran Hegemony. He began hunting down and killing all of the Cameron dynasty. Because democracies suck, most of the populace would see this as a legitimate takeover, just like the coup of James McKenna. Even though during the time of McKenna there was mass devastation with people dying, and this was a golden age where everything prospered. Oh, and McKenna's coup was generally relegated to political parties and not just random innocent civilians. The coup also happened 500 years ago. But hey, completely the same. Because you can't just trick the most powerful military in the galaxy and not have serious consequences, the rising of the Amaris Empire would find itself instantly under siege as the Star League Defense Force ultimately beat them back, inch by inch. As Amaris watched his empire start to slowly crumble, he began destroying modern marvels that had been created by the Star League. He would have nuclear devastation upon planets and persecution of even moderate supporters of his regime. Wow, who let Kim Jong-un read Battletech? The other great houses would utilize intelligence operations and military pressure to destroy any vestiges of the Amaris Empire and the Hegemony. It was ultimately brought down by Stefan himself, and the government of the Terran Hegemony and the Amaris Empire would fracture to only be overtaken by Comstar, and that ultimately would be the destruction of the Terran Hegemony. What began as a rocky start, leading into the creation of technologies the galaxy had never been seen, and ultimately the creation of the greatest and most stable government ever seen, ultimately was destroyed by greed. What an original concept. Guys, stay tuned because next time we'll be talking about the Draconis Combine. Hey guys, you like this non-track stuff? Well, the only way I can continue to do this is to have your support on Patreon. Consider checking me out, links in the description below. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.